Haidong! So in this video we're going to talk about light stretching. According to a few studies, whether or not you need to stretch kind of is dictated whether or not you already stretch, which kind of sounds a little bit weird. Pretty much if you're used to stretching, you should keep stretching. And if you don't stretch like ever, probably don't stretch for the first time like before you're going to do something really, really big. So that said, that's just what a study says. I tend to actually not stretch unless if I'm actually in the dojang here in order to actually teach. Whenever I go through my stuff, whenever I'm doing my own training, I tend to do it without stretching just because that's just, I guess, how I roll. That isn't necessarily how you need to roll. But that said, I'm going to show you when I do, in fact, do a stretch. This is what I use. That said, your stretching routine might be very different from your stretching routine of one of your peers. So for example, I feel like I don't necessarily need to do as much arm kind of stretches because my body is very used to moving without necessarily stretching. However, I have pretty bad knees and pretty bad hips. And also I'm pretty cautious about my neck as well. So although I may not do as many arm stretches that potentially other instructors think I should do, it's going to be dictated about what you need. That said, if you're here kind of like, all right, I want to do a general stretch for a general class, there's going to be a few options for you. What I do with my students is there's usually a little bit of time before class formally starts. I tell them, all right, if you need to stretch out, but once we bow in, we're just going straight into it. That gives them a little bit of freedom, like, all right, like I feel like my legs are like particularly bad, I'll work on those. If that person knows that they need to do a lot more stretching, they do tend to come in a little bit earlier so that they can do their full stretch. So I personally like this because I like to go straight into material. I like to work on combinations and stuff like that. I guess that's because I'm perhaps a little bit more impatient with that kind of thing. But again, this is really going to be more about your teaching style and kind of like what you want from your students. So for example, stretching is a good way to kind of without any antagonize or anything like that. It's a good way to have a little bit of a competition with your among your students, right? It's like, oh, like who can have a steeper stretch, right? Who can have a better split? Who can hold this position for longer? So that might be fine, especially if you have younger folk. That's actually pretty good for them because it actually gets a little bit of their energies out of the way. So then when they've done all the jumping jacks, they've done all the stretching, by that time they're ready to actually just focus because all the extra jitteriness is ideally gone. And also the type of stretch that you want to focus on is going to be different according to what you want to, again, focus on in class. So for example, I like a lot of application and stuff like that, and I don't personally care as much about having super deep, beautiful stances. So yes, we do a little bit of hip stretches and stuff like that, but most of it's actually going to be in stretching the neck. So just in case you do get hit in the head, you're not really, really stiff and rigid. You're pretty limber, right? So it depends on what you, as an instructor, or even you as a student, knowing what's going to happen, want to focus on. I would highly recommend. So again, if you're doing those longer stances, obviously do those stance stretches, right? So really try to get down lower, try different shifting positions. You can try to stretch that same muscle from different directions and stuff like that. But again, tailor it to what you are planning to do in that class. Now at this point, I'm also going to differentiate between stretching and what we call basics, right? So stretching is just getting yourself ready for the rest of the activities, and the basics are going to be, at least for Gumdo, tend to be in kimase, right? So your sitting stance, doing your center cuts, left-right cuts, etc., etc. So there is going to be a little bit of a differentiation between those two, at least in terms of these videos. And one last note before I get started with showing you what I do for my own personal stretching. Ideally, we're going to have a guest instructor going to show you what he does for his stretching, and he's a lot more in depth with the long stretching and things helping you in the long term. Again, I'm a little bit on the impatient side, so I tend to have these little bit shorter stretching, and so far my body has been able to withstand it. But so when that guest video comes out, probably lean toward what he does because he's been doing it much longer. But you have me for now, so let's get started. So as an instructor, it's really good to be systematic about how you do it. Mostly so, first of all, you don't forget to stretch a certain part of the body because you're trying, if you're doing this in front of the class, you're trying to do it for everyone. That's a really large basis to try to do that. So if you're systematic with how you do it, that's going to be helpful. So for example, what I usually do is going from the top down. You can also go from the extremities in. So for example, if you do a lot of like wrist stretches and eventually going into like the deeper shoulder stretches, that is also another good way to go. So I just mentioned that I'm going to work from top down. This is also going to be the point where I'm going to mention that I got a grand majority of the stuff from my kendo instructor. I kind of like switched it up a little bit with some stuff that I learned from my HEMA instructor. So a little bit of everything in this one. So what we're going to do is going to start from the top down. So you don't necessarily need to do anything particularly with your hands. I just like to have it in front. If you're a little bit more, I won't call it strict, but if this is something that you want your students to do, you can actually have them at attention and try to do this. Actually having them at attention is going to be good for one of these stretches in particular. But for me, like I tend to be like a little more relaxed because again, this usually isn't during proper class time for me. This is again before for them to all do that, all that stretching. But if this is during your class and you want to work on focusing on structure and stuff like that, this is a good time for them having their feet together, at attention, and start working on the neck stretches. That said, I'm going to be in a relaxed position here. So first, I like to do just side to side. So like twisting this way. So again, try not to roll forward or back. Try to keep it straight up and just twist, right? So now I do not recommend, that snapping motion because that's snapping motion where your neck is. So I would not recommend it. So ease into it, right? So especially if you haven't stretched out yet. And also studies have shown that shorter pulses as opposed to prolonged pushes tend to have better effects. So I would rather do, like maybe 3 pulses one way and another as opposed to like 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Just because again, that's again what science has told us is more effective. And at least from my own personal experience, there's nothing there that contradicts it. So we're gonna go with that. So what I recommend is 3 pulses side to side, right? Like so. If you want a better stretch, and this is something that I'm taking from my HEMA instructor. So if I'm twisting my head this way, I'm gonna try to push my hand down. I'm just gonna step back a little bit so you can probably see that a little bit better. I'm gonna push this hand down as I stretch out this way. You're gonna notice it's gonna stretch this part out a little bit more, which is why like you start in a attention right here and here again. So I just went side to side, so now front and back. Again, there's going to be a way to augment it, but without augmentation. Just lean forward, right? Lean back, forward, back. Now if you want to augment it, you can lean forward, cup your hands over the top, and gently just let the weight of your hands pull it down. One good thing to note with this one is actually think about your glutes activating as well. If you're kind of like limp here and just doing this, it's actually going to be pretty bad for your back as well. So make sure, again, your glutes are activated, your spine is pretty straight. So you should actually feel it not just in your neck, but you should feel it stretching all the way down into your shoulder as well. So if you're here, again, feel, also the core should activate a little bit. Push it down. And then this is allegedly what you do. I don't find that helped as much, but try that. Again, just a few times. And depending on how much you usually stretch, mixed up, right? So if you want to do this particularly long, like you have a lot of neck injuries, again, be very, very gentle, but might focus a little bit more on that, right? So we just went side to side, up and down, so as a roll, right? And bounce back. And do this a few times. Like so. And again, if there's anything else that you want to primarily work with this, you can. At this point, I usually go to the shoulder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back one more time. So you probably are used to like the big arm sweeps, right? I tend to do, and this is again something I'm taking from my kendo instructor, you're going to do a calf raise as you do it. So what you're going to do is calf raise up, bounce back. Calf raise up, bounce back. So I like this because first of all, it gets you used to like the whole body moving a little bit more. It's a little bit more about coordination as well. One thing to note as you go through this, be conscious of what the heel of your palms are doing. If you're just kind of straight here, that's going to give you something. But if you really think about pushing the edge of your palm out as you do your stretch, you're going to notice it's a lot deeper. This is going to be true when we start doing just out here. But focus mostly on where the heels of your palms are. So as you do your calf raises with your stretches, you're going to feel it a lot more. So you're going to do that a few times. And from there, there's nice big circles, again, pushing out with the palm here. Now you should feel this inside your deep shoulder. So a little bit on the top, right? But also like in the socket of your shoulder blades here, right? And again, you make it smaller if you want to. Reverse and make it bigger. So this is something that you can actually kind of make, switch up a little bit for especially your younger students, right? You can be like, okay, so bigger, bigger, smaller, 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 and then bounce back, small, bigger, bigger, etc. Right? Now, if you're working with adults, that might be a little bit patronizing, so probably think about that before you start that. But that's still a good stretch, right? Because that's going to be focusing on the inner shoulder blades that way. From that point, I like to do so have your feet shoulder width apart. Again, keep your back straight. Don't do like this slumping thing. Here, again, it's a very simple one, just like leaning over, right? You should feel this part stretch out a little bit more. Right? If you want to make it even better, so again, do this a few times. I actually feel a little bit in the small of my back because again, I have some issue there for whatever reason. So do that a few times. If you want to get even better stretch, so reach across, hands over. So again, not over in front, behind, exactly in line with the plane of your body, and moving over that way. And same thing other side. Like so. And from there, we're going to do torques, right? So from here, there are a couple ways you can do this. I like the half full, half full. So it's going to look like this. So I tend to actually do something like this just because there's something to do with my hands. So half twist, full twist, half twist, full twist, half, full, half, full. So that lets you get a little bit deeper into the stretch. If you have back issues, that might be a little bit harder for you. I've also seen just keeping your arms tucked in this way. They're going back and forth, right? And yeah, another way you can do this is actually, I've seen this with Chinese style, is have your arms really, really loose, right? Just kind of out this way. You don't necessarily have to twist as much. You're going to notice that your arms are actually going to propel a little bit more. You're going to get a little bit of a deeper stretch. Now it might look silly, but you're actually going to notice you get pretty good blood flow into your arms with this as well. But also is just a generally good stretch. From there, I like to take a tato-sei, so a long stance. What I like to do first is just rotate the knee. So this is actually going to be rotating the inside of the groin here. So rotate, rotate. Again, I have a little bit of hip issues, so this is something that I tend to do even if I'm not intending to stretch otherwise, this is something that I do anyway. So rotate, rotate, so I can feel the inside of the groin open up, and then lean into that stretch. Again, activate the glute, push your hip into it, like so. Likewise, switch, right? So from here, rotate. And then once you feel like you're properly rotated, sink in. Again, feel that glute activate and sink in. Now if I'm feeling ambitious, from here, I'm going to go into a bokosei. So from here, you can be a little bit fancy and just have your hands open. Just be like, oh, down here. This is going to be good for the front knee here. Not great for this knee here. So if you're going to do this, be very, very careful. This is an excellent stretch for the leg that's extended, but be careful. And likewise, when you switch, this is not my good side. So side note, I have injury on this knee where I have half of a lateral meniscus. So that's fun. It just adds to the flavor of the stretch, right? Again, you might notice I'm also pulsing up and down a little bit more as opposed to just sinking in. And you can come up. If you want to, you can do a little bit of a hip rotation here as well. What I like to do next is have both feet parallel. This might be similar to a Taekwondo front stance, just a little bit more narrow. First time, I just let the back heel back and just try to kick that heel back all the way to the floor. and you should hopefully feel the calf muscles activate a little bit more. So I like to do this for a little bit, and then once that's feels sufficiently stretched out, if you want to have even better stretch, you can step a little bit more back. But from here, I'm actually going to raise, so the leg that's back, I'm going to raise the arm up, like so. You're going to notice that this, again, I have hip issues. This is going to open up the inside of the hip really, really well, like so. And you can also bring it across, like so. And same thing with the other side, right? So stepping back, bounce a little bit so that get that stretch into the calf muscle. Bring it up, and breathe all the while, and bring it across, like so. At this point, so if you want to continue with, there's one more thing that Kendo does that I don't, but it's actually not that bad either. So all you're going to do is just like bounce, right? So this is working on just getting the small muscle groups and the calf muscles, getting a little bit more power, right? So this is obviously from Kendo when they do the lunge with the fumikomi, but it's still good for us, right? Because we use the chiansei, so the walking stance. So what they do is here, occasionally they do like, oh no, dual set, dual set, dual set, right? So on the third set, so in English that was 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. And then same thing for going down into a lunge. So it'd be on a dual set, dual set, dual set, and back up. And the last thing that I usually do for my own stretch is the pinky ring middle stretch. Now this is really, really good for all students, right? So over here, you're going to just do pinky ring middle squeeze. And what's good is if you have a ring of students, have them all count out 10, right? So it'd be hana, tu, set, net, dasa, yasa, you go, you do, hop, yo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., etc. And from there, stretch it out. And same thing going up. Hana, tu, set, net, dasa, yasa, you go, you do, hop, yo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's going to work on the muscles that are associated with the forearm, which is really good for your own individual cut. If you want even better ones, this is a stretch that I showed before in some video. But from here, push the palm out, pinky ring middle flex, roll up this way. So this is a really good stretch as well. But there you have it. So that's what I do for my own individual stretch. If I'm ever leading a stretch, that's usually what I do as well. I usually don't necessarily do the jumping just because it's very specific to Kendo. And again, it's not something that I necessarily use in my own fighting. But so that's what I use. So again, we're hopefully going to have a guest instructor giving an even more in-depth video. But until then, so keep training and stay safe and stay humble. Haidong